Welcome to Clay and Conversations at the Clay Studio. We are excited to be joined by Ken Vavrek and Amy Sarner Williams today. As we're celebrating our 50th anniversary and Founders and Foundations, the exhibition that we have in the gallery right now. So I am going to start by letting everyone know that we are recording today. And also that we recognize that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenape-Hawking, the traditional homeland of the Lenni Lenape people. We would like to take a moment to reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past, present, and future stewards of the land, and all of our role in joining together with their tradition of respect and caring for the land and each other. So we are welcoming first, Amy Sarner Williams is a professional artist who attended the University of Pennsylvania, where she earned her BA. She lives and works in Philadelphia. She is one of the earliest resident artists of the Clay Studio, one of 6 members who worked to continue the Clay Studio after the 1980 fire. So one of those moments, sort of transition or what's going to happen next, important. Yeah. And she has played a major role in the organization's development over the years. Spent most of her career in the field of ceramic art, teaching, creating, and exhibiting. She's had many local and national solo and group shows. In 1994, she joined the development staff at the Clay Studio in Old City, Philadelphia. She's also been a member of the board of directors and board chair. And in 2001, Amy became the executive director. And during her 10 years of leadership, doubled the organizational capacity and increased its financial strength. Thank you for doing
There we go. I know.
Yeah. Ken Vavrek earned his BFA and MFA from Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, and then became an art professor at Moore College of Art and Design in Philadelphia, where he taught from 1970 until 2002. In 1974, Ken and 4 students from Moore College decided to band together and rent a community studio space in Old City, Philadelphia, inaugurating the studio. Thank you for doing that, Ken.
Hey.
Ken Vavrek has had numerous solo exhibitions in Pennsylvania and New England, has worked represented in collections, including at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Milwaukee Art Center, the Cleveland Museum of Art, and the Fulé International Ceramics Art Museum in Shanghai, China. He has received numerous craft fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Pennsylvania Council. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm going to ask the question that we ask every time, which is how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art? And we haven't decided who's going to go first. Should we let you go first?
Okay, I'll go first. That's fine. I'll go first.
Good.
My journey in art did not start really early, like some of the other artists who've been talking here. I grew up in a, pretty much a white bread suburb of Philadelphia. My father was a lawyer, but he was also an amateur musician, a violinist, and my mother was an avid reader, and she dabbled a little bit in sculpture and painting. But it wasn't, we weren't like an art family. But one summer when I was, I guess, about 10, I went with my dad up to Goddard College, where he would go to a chamber music camp, basically a camp for adults. And so they brought me and my sister along, and one of the things they had for us to do up there was to throw on the potter's wheel. So I loved that and remembered it forever. Then as I got more into my teens, I became absolutely head over heels for the Beatles and hippie culture and, the whole idea of a beautiful world with peace and love. And it really mattered to me a lot. And I really just wanted to live a life that was really true. I made my own Indian print Nehru jacket, and had posters all over my walls of my favorite artists and singers, and but I always knew I was going to go to college to get a BA. Basically, my parents wanted me to get an Ivy League education. So that was the path I was on, and actually went in that path. But in my senior year of high school, I walked into my first day of my math class, my pre-calc class, and walked out of that class, dropped it, and took art. And just really was, just wanted to be much more around those kind of people and do that sort of thing. But, you know, my father was very clear about choices in life. You have two choices. You can be a doctor or a lawyer. And that was not appealing to me. Now, my two siblings went that lawyer route. But I went on to Penn, to University of Pennsylvania. And partway through, I really realized I did not want to be an academic, go into any academic field. So I said to my dad, I really want to transfer. I want to go to art school. So he said, like fathers will, get your BA, you'll have something to fall back on. So I did that, but with some courage, I petitioned the College for Women, which was what was there at Penn at the time, that I could take a ceramics class at Moore College of Art and get credit at Penn, because they didn't have any ceramics classes there. So they agreed, and so I did that. I fulfilled my BA, and then after college, really wanted to pursue going to art school, getting an MFA, putting together a portfolio. I started taking classes at Tyler with Rudy Staffel and Bob DeWinnegar. Took glass blowing with John Clark. Just took some art classes, basic art classes at Temple, and was really working toward that goal. And that's when, around that time was when I ran into Ken Vavrek on a city bus. And I knew Ken because he had been at Moore and I had been there. He also lived in my neighborhood, and he worked with my future husband building furniture for a small a private school that the people were starting over there. So I guess we just got into conversation, and I guess he asked me, I don't remember exactly, Ken, but he asked me what am I up to? And I told him I'm, trying to get a portfolio together. And he said, oh, you really should come down and check out the clay studio. So this is 1975, maybe 6 months or a little bit more than that after it started. And so I went down there. I applied for a residency. They were opening it up at that time. They let me in, which was fantastic. And I never got my MFA. This was my education. I was just surrounded by people who were passionate and knew so much more than I did. And I've just never regretted it.
Great. Didn't know about the city bus meeting. Find out new things every time we meet them. So did your dad sort of eventually accept that you were not going to be a lawyer?
He did. Yeah, he did. I mean, he just really, what he wanted, what he believed in is you have to be your own boss and you have to run the show.
Well, that's what artists do.
And so that's right. And so, I think he, and he really respected when I became the director of the Clay Studio. Although you're not exactly your own boss, you're working for a lot of people when you're the director, as you guys know. So.
Sure. Well, but you're still the boss of a lot.
Right. Well, that's
great. Okay. Thank you for that.
certainly.
How about you, Ken? Can you think about those early moments when you decided that art was the way you wanted to live your life?
Yes. The fact that I made that decision goes back to my seeing a lot of art when I was growing up. My dad liked to go to the Cleveland Museum of Art, particularly to see the May show. And we did that most years. And once when we went to the Cleveland Museum of Art, I heard that they had Saturday classes, and I asked somebody what that meant, and so I started going to the Cleveland Museum of Art in the 7th grade and 8th grade for Saturday classes, and there were all these kids would show up on the Saturday morning, and they would divide us up into groups, roughly different age groups, and groups would be like 6 to 10 students or so, and a teacher would take us to some corner of the museum, and we would do a project. And I did that for 2 years, and I just really, really loved it, and I was always involved in art in some way after that. But in my schooling, I from 7th grade through 11th grade, I thought of different careers that were of interest to me, and said, "Oh, I think I'll be this. Oh, I think I'll be that." And then I got to the 12th grade, and I didn't know what I wanted to be. Suddenly, I didn't have an idea. None of those other ideas held up. So I went to the school counselor and I said, I don't know what I want to be, and I thought that was going to influence where I was going to go to school. And he said, "Well, what are you strong in?" I said, "Well, I'm absolutely the strongest in science and math." He says, "Well, you should go into science then." He said, "You should apply to Case Institute of Technology." I applied to Case. I got in. My freshman year, I did okay. I had a B average. But then I had to drop out. It was, 1957. They didn't have student loans at that time. I couldn't afford the school. And I had a scholarship that would paid for half of my tuition. I couldn't pay the other half. But I almost dropped out after the end of the first semester. I dropped out at the end of the year. I got a job at Republic Steel. I had that job for 2 years, trying to build up the savings. And, I knew I was going to go back to school. I just didn't know where I was going to go and so forth. And then a friend of mine took a night class at the Cleveland Institute of Art. And I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." So I signed up for a night class at the Cleveland Institute of Art. And then when I looked at the curriculum at OU, I said, "You know what? I would like to do something, and I think I'm going to become a high school art teacher." And so I headed to OU thinking that I was going to become a high school art teacher. And that's probably what would have happened, except that when I took ceramics with Henry Lynn, who is the father of Maya Lynn, and yeah, he started having designs of how he could utilize me to advance the things that he wanted to advance. And that led me to taking more ceramics classes than I was planning. I was loving them, but he got me almost immediately a thing to teach. He had this connection to Kenyon College. One of his graduate students was teaching there, and that graduate student was graduating, and he didn't have another graduate student to plug in there. So he got me to commit to take extra ceramics for the next semester in the summer so I could teach at Kenyon College that fall. And I did that. And then that was the beginning. And him keeping me there, he moved me straight onto my MFA. I had no idea that I was ever going to get an MFA. And so I got my MFA, and then I got a job teaching in Wisconsin. I was there for 5 years before I came to Moore College of Art. And the reason I came to Moore College of Art is when I was teaching in Wisconsin, this girl came in to my ceramics class there, and she said something to me, and I thought that she was just looking in, and she mentioned that she was at Moore, and that she was that she was from Philadelphia, and I had been looking for a place in Philadelphia or someplace on the East Coast that I could go, and I had looked at what schools were in Philadelphia, but I hadn't seen Moore, and I said, "Where's Moore?" And she says, "It's in Philadelphia." And she looked at me like I was the dumbest person in the world. So I immediately went to the library, got that book out again of the colleges, and I looked at Philadelphia. I got the address, and I wrote a letter to Moore, and I got a reply back saying, "I'm going to send your portfolio." I sent my portfolio. They called me up and said, "You know, or they sent me a letter." Anyhow, they offered me a job, and I said, "Well, I mean, I couldn't believe it that they were just offering me a job on the basis of my portfolio." So anyhow, that's how I came to Philadelphia. But mainly it was a transition that Henry provided that really sealed the deal in terms of my getting staying in art. And I think that my scientific side did contribute to my getting deeply into glazes, which is like one of my, kind of things. And I think that that pretty much is my story.
That's great. I mean, if it wasn't for that girl, who was that girl?
Yeah, who was this person?
None of us would be sitting here. That girl come in and said, "What about Margaret?"
Well, that's how I got to Moore College of Art, and I was really thrilled that I got to Moore College of Art. I mean, all of my preferences out of the East Coast schools or cities, I wanted to get to Philadelphia, and one of the main reasons I wanted to get to Philadelphia is because I had been to New York City a couple of times, and I just wanted to go to New York City, and I didn't want to live in New York City, but Philadelphia was great access. And when I moved here, I went to New York City probably 5 times a year, because I would then I'd cruise the Upper East Side galleries, then I'd go to mid 57th Street and cruise all those galleries. And then I went down to Soho before the gallery scene in the South went over to Chelsea. And anyhow, I cruised the gallery scene and museums thoroughly for many, many, many years. I continued that through the whole time. And I'll tell you why. It's because even though I had an MFA and had been teaching art for 5 years, I felt my art education wasn't complete. And I really went to New York City really to complete my art education by looking at art, looking at art, looking at art, looking at art. And I do think that that helped me a lot. And I'm really glad that I had that access. That was a very fulfilling part of my life in Philadelphia.
Right. I see a parallel there because, Amy, you were very intentional about continuing to take classes and seeking out those classes. And so both of you on your own, your motivation to be artists drove you to continue your art education, kind of saying through going to see work, which I'm sure you did too. But
Right.
then for you, when you knew you needed more classes.
Absolutely. And I remember another thing I forgot to say earlier. Last week when Jill Bonovitz was on this, she said that her mom had a gallery and her mother told her that artists are the coolest people. And I remember this line from Bob Dylan's song, You Belong to Me. It starts, she's got everything she needs. She's an artist. She don't look back. And that just, I always loved that. I wanted to participate in a world of beauty, and what better way to do it than to make art.
Well, thanks for sharing both of those very personal stories. I'd like to turn a little bit to some Play Studio memories, and then we're going to look at work by each of you, both things that are in the exhibition downstairs and also other works of art. So you both have definitely talked about those formative, very, very initial parts of your time at the Play Studio. But Amy, I know that we've talked a lot before, but for the benefit of the audience and the recording, do you want to talk at whichever point, I think in the history it stands out to you most, is like whatever was the most
Well, I was a resident artist in the 70s until early 80s. My husband and I bought a house and I set up my studio there. But always loved the community that the Play Studio had been. And somewhere in that period of time, I also became got on the board. I was actually the chair of the board for a while. And, was throughout the 80s, I was making work and doing like craft shows, Philadelphia Craft Show, Baltimore for years, American Craft Council. And, but, and I was teaching at Mainline Art Center for about 12 years, but I was working in my basement, and I found that being an artist, a solo artist, was somewhat lonely. And so I made a choice to get out of my studio and go to work at the Play Studio. Jimmy Clark, who was the director, he had a development assistant who got a full-time job. And so I thought, well, okay, I could do that, and started writing grants for him. And then, right away he threw in front of me all the finances and like, make sense of this. And so, that was actually essential to really understanding how an organization works. And it was a small organization at that time, but it was growing and growing. And by 2000, 2001, it was really too much for one person to be the artistic director and the executive director. So Jimmy stayed on as artistic director, and I became executive director. Which that didn't last very long, but for me, it lasted 10 years. And as you said, it was a period of time when we were about a $750,000 organization, to $1 million. That's a very difficult moment in an organization's life, because we were all artists. Everyone who ran the place were artists. We didn't have any management background. We didn't have any financial background. We didn't have any real systems in place, and that's what had to happen. And so during that period of time, we started, getting a real database, setting up real systems within the organization. And so it wasn't the sexiest part of the history of the Play Studio, but it was one that was really, really essential to get past that period of time when a lot of organizations will fail. I mean, there were lots of times in the history of this organization when it could have failed. But that was, and then the best thing that we did the whole time there, in 2007, Catherine found Jen Martin as the shop tech. And I agree, I made the hire, and so that really changed the trajectory of this organization for sure. But then, in 2011, I realized I knew what was going to happen here with this organization. We were going to need to raise a ton of money and move. And I thought, when I took the executive director job, I said 5 years, and it was 10. And I thought, okay, I'm going to have to put another 10 years, and do I really want to do that? So I stepped away, and went back to making art. I really didn't make any art during the 10 years I was director. And it was good. I did, a lot of good reasons that I did that. But it was just a joy to see this place get where I always wanted it to go, like to live forever. So I played that part. I played a part of that.
Very important.
So, yay.
How many, yes, let's clap. How many staff members were there when you started?
Oh my God.
Just
It was, Jimmy, me, Catherine, I think we had He Sung was the gallery person.
Mhm.
There were, and then we had a shop tech, and then the teachers, of course.
And that's when there were other organizations in the building.
Yeah, there were, when Jimmy moved from up the street from, south of, south of Arch Street to north of Arch Street. He did that with the support of William Penn and Pew, who really put that money in because there were a number of organizations. So it was a hub for art. And it really, the Clay Studio and that Second Street art building really transformed Old City into an arts destination, which it was for many years, basically until we left. That's right. Yeah. Along with Snyderman Gallery and Wexler and those people, we worked on Old City Arts and then that was fantastic for years. The First Friday, just tons of people coming through.
Now we're one of the anchors of a new arts neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you for sharing all that. It's really inspiring to me working here. I feel so lucky, and I always make sure that I tell young artists that this place that you see, this amazing building, was started 50 years ago by just 5 + 12 people who really believed in shared space, and that it was all about being an artist and making something happen. And you said none of you had management experience, but the idea that artists are problem solvers and creative thinkers is why it works. And it's another reason that I think artists in our society are sometimes stereotyped to be,
Flaky,
witty, and that they can't be organized, and none of that is true. And in fact, there are many really beneficial parts of being a creative thinker. And just telling that story is empowering to young people. So in addition, just to the Clay Studio.
And when the fire happened in 1980, there had been 18 of us artists. But we moved, and then 6 months later, this fire happened. And after the 18 artists, that was another crucial moment. And there were just 6 of us left. And I was one of those. And basically, because I wanted this community. I loved being part of this community. I didn't want to see it die.
Thank you. Ken, so for your memories of the Clay Studio, we should definitely focus on those early years and what it meant to you to have a community of people that you could work within. Do you want to share some of those early memories with us about how you found the original building and what it was like to be in this space, the other artists?
Well, we went to some realtors and the 5 of us did, and pretty quickly, I don't remember going to any other building except the one on Oriana Street. And when we walked in and we saw that it was all concrete and that we wanted to have a kill, that persuaded us a lot. And then we saw that there were 3 floors. We didn't have enough people to occupy 3 floors. So I ended up living on the top floor for a couple of years. And the first year I had the whole floor to myself. And I, put up a swing that was one thing for my son to swing on. I put a sandbox in there and so forth. And then the next year we had enough members that they wanted half of that space, so I built a wall separating, and I lived on one side of that wall, and anyhow, that was a crazy beginning, and then I I knew that I wanted, as much as I liked being with the group and enjoyed the start of the clay studio, I knew I wanted to have my own studio. I wanted to have my own house. And so I didn't have, I had hardly any money at all. And I heard that Northern Liberties was a place where you could get something cheap. South Street was at maybe, 10, 15, 20 years before. And Northern Liberties was the new, like, where you go. And I got 3 properties for $12,000. So evidently it was right. And I tried to get a bank loan. You couldn't get a bank loan. It was a red line. And I got the advice. They said the owners, and there was a family that owned those 3 properties. They lived in one of them. And I said, would you take, they said, he suggested I ask them to take back the mortgage, and they took back the mortgage. Anyhow, on that property, there was this big tall building behind one of them that I built my first fiber kill. 1974 was when fibers came out of the space program, and I built my first fiber kill, and I continued to develop the downstairs of one of those properties into my studio, and that was important to me. And unfortunately, I moved out of the community of the clay studio. That was a trade-off that took. And I was glad that the clay studio kept on going. And I was glad when I got back on the board of the clay studio. And that was for, I don't know how many years it was. I'm guessing that it was 8 to 10 years or so that I was on the board. And I liked that connection. But I'll tell you one thing that I do remember early on when we were starting, when I was living in that first building, Kathy Dalzell, I remember her saying it could have been somebody else, but I'm pretty sure it was her. She says, we have to get some money. We have to get some grants. And Stuart told her, well, you can't get grants unless you're a nonprofit. And she said, well, how do we become a nonprofit? He said, well, you have to, serve the community somehow or another. You have a gallery or you teach classes. And that's what the clay studio is in my mind. It teaches classes, and it has a gallery, and it serves 3 times as many students in the teaching respect. That's the proportion that I understand in the new gallery or in the new building compared to the old building. It's 3 times the classroom space. And to me, that's like one of the things that I feel makes the clay studio the special place that it is. I mean, the fact that it works with clay is another important thing. And all those people that are coming in there, taking those classes, are having a good time. And for me, the important thing about life is having a good time. And the clay studio, I think, is a place where you go to have a good time. Anyhow, that's
I hear more parallels. I mean, that's what you said. You realized you wanted life to be about art and beauty
and
enjoyment.
creativity and excitement and energy, and I loved all the different kinds of firings. I mean, that's so when I left, I started doing more raku, Although we did do raku in the original building, and we did raku in the 49 North Second Street.
I don't think the
also.
fire marshal can.
That's
get us in
okay.
trouble
I
about
think,
Don't
I
forget.
loved it. I loved it when, I think it was Martha that said something about, coming to the clay studio. And I greeted her at the door, and my face was all black from doing raku down in the basement.
Right.
And that was really challenging and a little bit crazy. Smoking in a basement thing, not having a direct ventilation. But that's only the
Everything-
tip of the iceberg of the things that I have done that are crazy.
Right.
Every time we talk about this, I think, where are we gonna install the swing, Jennifer?
Yeah. I like the street light.
The sandbox, we need the sandbox.
On the fruit pits.
There we go.
Um,
Right, okay.
Okay, so, we've talked about this a lot. We're gonna quickly look through everybody's beautiful artwork. So we'll go back.
Up to the one up
Oh,
right
sorry.
above it. So, okay, yeah. So, this is my early work. Again, Ken Vavrek had a huge impact on me in terms of my early work. It's nothing like Ken's, but he went across the country in the late 70s, whenever it was, and came back after seeing the landscape out in the West, and came back and started doing these fantastic three-dimensional wall pieces and three-dimensional, like, different vessel forms which related to the landscape. So I had never basically been anywhere, and Dave and I drove across the country in, I think it was 1981, and I just, around every corner, I just was flabbergasted at what I saw. So in particular, the mark of mankind in amongst the landscape. So next one is from my lake in Maine, where I go every summer. All my inspiration has really mostly been from the landscape. This piece next is these were the pieces I did when I was doing all the craft shows. They're taped off and sprayed and latex and very, very time consuming. But I really loved the way the shapes went around the forms. So it was very satisfying to me. I began doing on this next one here. I began doing these pieces in raku, and I went out to, my mother had a property out in York, Pennsylvania, and we would drive out there and fire in a raku kiln out there. And I would get these gorgeous copper colors, which always intrigued me, and did a lot of this work. And then the newest things here are then in 2020, when we had the pandemic. I went up to Maine and spent the summer up there, and just started picking up birch bark from the ground, and wondered, how do you work with this material? I've always loved this material. And so I went to YouTube, and there was some woman who was showing how you separate the layers of the bark, and as it turns out, every layer is a different color and a different pattern. And so it was like all my same kind of colors, all my same kind of ideas. In particular, if you go one down, I started doing these, thinking the way the light bounced off of the waves in the lake, reminded me of the marks in the bark itself. And then this is the latest piece of mine, which is a combination of little wheel thrown pieces that I did here in the soda kiln, and a depiction of a kiln opening, you know, a wood kiln or a soda kiln, salt kiln. So I really enjoyed, you know, being able to move on to a new material and yet keep in many ways some of the same aesthetic.
And you got to be back here as a guest artist.
I did, which was fantastic.
Fun for us.
So last April, I spent a month here. And these are some pieces I did before the pandemic, or around, you know, I was working at a studio in West Philly, still using, this was a lot of photo transfer stuff that I did. And then the next one I like better even, in that, you know, it's kind of it's a landscape. It's also my my profile in the land, and
Oh.
yeah. So so that is what I've been doing.
Well, and so this was before the birch bark, but of course
Yeah.
it's so similar.
It is similar. Yeah, so it's very, you know, there, you notice as an artist how, you know, things that you are attracted to visually, it's always the same kind of thing, or you know, things keep repeating themselves.
Right, I mean, even if the earliest piece we
Mhm.
have, it's different, you've evolved, you've explored other materials, but it's very much your style.
Yeah.
Which I think.
Oh,
Oh,
and
there's
then-
one more, I love this one.
Yeah, I love this one too. These were, you know, again, the sort of this vanishing point, this idea of space out there, and just the different textures and colors. You know, like,
Very simple shapes, and you
yeah,
made it a really complex image
Yeah.
that your brain can understand.
Yep.
Even with the like sunset color, that's just in the birch bark.
yeah, no, it's, oh yeah, I mean, I never do anything to the color. I don't do anything. It's all in the birch bark. So that's you know, I love like the processes of all this stuff. So I loved just the peeling and looking at the colors and you know, finding the stuff on the ground. I know I don't take it off of real trees, living trees, just saying.
And then this one connects, well, all of that really connects so wonderfully to Ken's work.
Mhm.
So Ken, you want to
Mhm.
talk about your pieces here, Ken?
Yeah, that was, you know, as Amy referenced, I did that trip out to the Southwest. And that was, I got invited to do a workshop out in Utah. I don't know how I got that invitation, but we camped near Arches National Monument. The town was near there. And from there, we went from Arches across Monument Valley, and then over to the Grand Canyon, of course, and then we headed back. But Arches and Monument Valley just blew me away. And I had been across the country before, but I hadn't gone through that direction. And I just, on the whole way back, I was thinking about that, and I just couldn't get my mind off of it. And so I knew that it was going to affect my work. And so that was 75. And this piece is 81. The early things I did in Raku, and some of those pieces were interesting. I don't know what happened to those pieces. I don't have it. I probably sold some, and then some of them probably got broken. But anyhow, uh, this is typical of my wall sculptures, and I think I should mention that when I was in graduate school at OU, I had done a bunch of painting, and the painters, the painting faculty were kind of trying to get me to become a painting major. Henry wanted me to be a ceramics major, and I actually, even after I started my MFA program, I did take painting one or two painting classes while I'm working on my MFA in ceramics. And I think that speaks a lot about why I have produced so much work for the wall. And, and you look at the platters that I'm doing now, and it just was, the platters now are more painting than ever. These things were paintings, they were just dimensional paintings. And so that's the background on that. I really love making these things. The next piece is a diptych, and that was piece. I'm really glad I have this piece. It's in my house, as you know, Jen. And the diptychs were fun. I loved playing with it. I'm glad that I have this one. It looks very strong in the house, and the dimensionality is very important. And the visual games, the visual ways that I see of connecting it still work well for me. The piece below that, this piece is related to Monument Valley. I did a lot of these vessels that have this horizontal base, and the mesas in Monument Valley, when you go through there, it has been said by a lot of people, I can't say that it's the main point of reference, but I think it might be, is that it was like an armada of ships going across that desert. And that, when I came back, this is what that got translated into. And Desperado is one of my favorite titles. I think the piece deserves that because of that black shape there. It really suggests the mood that the name Desperado suggests, I guess. Anyhow, I like being able to talk about this vessel and why it's on that space. Anyhow, the next piece that I have there is a piece that I'm glad the Clay Studio accepted, and it's one of my sectionals. And when I moved, the Desert Parade went from 1975 to 1995. And I started moving away from that. I was doing some different kinds of wall sculptures. And then eventually I got to this work, which I call, abstractions. And there's the sectionals that are like this, that are composed of different pieces put together. And the outside shape is irregular there. I like to have the negative spaces in the middle. And this is one that I feel was really very successful. And while I was doing these, I was doing platters, and I started the platters in 2008, and they didn't get really strong until later. And then eventually they got to this, and I've made a lot of platters that are like rectangular with round corners. But I find this large oval, particularly the scale of the side, which is like about 26 inches high, is important to me. It gives me a room to move around and do different things within that space. And this is where my glaze centeredness, in addition to the painting aspect of the piece, is what glaze does. What I do with glaze, painters don't move there because the material is not going through the same process of melting and so forth. And I build up a dimensionality by having some of the glazes have extra clay in them, so they're more viscous, so they don't melt down as much. So I can pile it up and it can stay a bump. And I have fun playing with that. And then like the glaze that like black glaze in the upper right-hand corner is what I call my Liz glazes, and it has a high magnesium content, which is typical of glazes that crackle. But if you get enough melting, then it just it models, and what's underneath comes up from the bottom. And to me, that's another thing. And so it's just really playing with those textural differences. And then, the dot thing is another thing. And then in those green areas on the left, I do what I call wet sgraffito. I have a base color under there that's like a dark green, and then I have this kind of like light gray glaze that when I put it on as a puddle, and while it's wet, I scratch through it to the glaze underneath, and so that's a wet sgraffito. And so I just really have fun playing around with those variables, and so that's where I'm at now.
Ken, are these pieces fired more than once? Glaze fired?
No,
Oh.
everything that I have done in the wet or in the abstraction period, when I started working that way, I glaze on leather hard.
Oh.
And I fire once. And if it doesn't come out, there's no going back onto it and trying to change it. The thing is, I do a drawing of this, and then I glaze it, and I keep my fingers crossed, and I hope that it will come out in the way the drawing is. And my kill works pretty consistently. There was one platter that it was maybe about a year ago. And for some reason or another, my reds didn't come out, and it was dependent on my reds very much. It was the one that I put the most dependency on, the rich red. And I learned that I was over reducing. And so since then, I have even better control over my kill, and I'm very happy with it. And I treat it like a pet. And I think of it like a pet. And it's like, I want to give it proper credit that it deserves for its contribution. Anyhow.
Our elevator. Great, thank you. And thank you for donating this beautiful piece that you can't see right now, but we're all looking at on the wall. It's really special.
Well, that's the piece that I, showed in, I did this, I keep wondering if I'm going to go back and do any sectionals. I did some small sectionals, which were not that we're not that successful. It's not the scale. It's like maybe somehow or another, and moving down in scale, it affected my designing process. It could be that I just went through a bad design period. But I had a friend living in Washington, D.C., and they tore out an arts and culture section out of the Washington Post and sent it to me because it talked about how all artists have, in fact, all good artists, the article said, to quote it more accurately, all good artists produce as much or more bad art than all other artists. And I like to think that that's why I deserve to be in the good categories, because I got a ton of bad stuff.
I like it. Thank you, Ken.
Okay.
Well, that was wonderful. I wanted to ask if anyone has any questions. We're a little bit over already, but I'm sure that we can spend another minute or two if anyone in the audience wants to ask a question.
I have a question for Ken.
Okay.
Ken, I also want to so acknowledge you are an incredible engineer. Your kiln building, designing is extraordinary. And I was so fortunate to get to bring my class from Abington up there to do that raku with you and see your kilns. They're beautiful. They're more than pets. But anyway, what temperature are you firing at?
It's actually it's cone 7 down, cone 8 starting. And I when the fibers came out and I had this big space. Well, I think I was one of a lot of ceramic artists that jumped in right away and started working with the fiber. And you could get a 20 by 30 sheet of the board, and they told you that it was going to shrink. And the industry hadn't figured out like how to curl the things together to make those things that you put in place. They just told you it's going to shrink, you're going to get cracks, and you just stuff the cracks. So that's the way I built my first kiln. And the stuff that you put in the cracks fell out of the cracks in the next firing, and so then you'd stuff the cracks again. And then when I took that down and moved, and I built my next kiln, I said, well, this is dumb, and I've got all these large sheets that are shrunk now. I'm going to cut them up into smaller pieces so that I can, install them as tiles on the inside, and then I can make some. When I need to replace any of those tiles, I will cut a tile and I will fire it in a firing and pre-shrink it and then cut it to size to fit the space. And so I haven't had any problem with it since then. And
It's great. It's like when you're sewing a cut, you'll wash the fabric first before you cut.
There you go.
And sew it together. Beautiful.
Yeah. Anyhow, it took me a while to figure out. The ceiling, of course, was one of the harder parts to figure out. And I eventually came to a pretty good conclusion on that too. And so the good thing is that all of this has worked out so that I don't have to do any repairs on my kiln, and it just works really fine. And when I fire now, I used to put 4 cone packs in on the top and bottom on the right side and top and bottom on the left rear. Now I put 1 cone pack in the top right-hand corner, and it works. And so anyhow, that's all that technical stuff. But boy, when you fire it up, you want it to come out right, and I'm glad it's pretty consistent for me. And now I'm even happier. I've got better information, visual in my mind about like how to make sure I don't over reduce my kill.
It's exciting. The thing that I love so much about our field is that life is that you can keep learning every minute, and you never really arrive. We just keep exploring, but that's the greatest thrill, and to keep learning and honing the skills all the time.
Yeah, I what I like about art is how artists learn and their thinking changes. I remember when I was a student, abstract expressionism was the primary painting mode at that time. And I loved learning about how the different artists moved into abstract expressionism. And then I remember when pop art came on, and all the abstract expressionists were just like, oh, give me a break. They just could not absorb that. And I absorbed it in about a year and a half. I got used to it, and I started liking it. And when my art would change, I said, there's probably going to be some people that are sorry to see my art change, but I'm changing it. And I went through some changes where I was like, oh, why did I do that? And then I went through changes like, that I'm like happy with now. And I say, well, there's going to be people who like it and people who don't. And that's natural.
Yeah.
And it all, I think that there are things that that I favor that other people don't like, and vice versa.
True in everything in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Garth turned his camera on. Do you have a question, Garth? Or are you just saying hi?
No, just enjoying being part of the social scene and soaking up the stories. Ken, I knew the swing was going to come up, so thank you for mentioning it.
And hi, Helen. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming last week.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending an hour with us, more than an hour. We will see you again in a couple of weeks here.
2 weeks, right?
2 weeks.
It'll be.
It's Kathy and Catherine.
Yep.
Kathy Dalzell and Catherine Narrow. So please join us for that. If you would
Okay.
like to help us keep these programs high quality and free for everyone, consider donating on our website to the exhibition fund. Thank you, Amy.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Amy.